In our last video, we added a drop shadow. I had showed you a manual way to create a drop shadow, and then there's a way to create a drop shadow using layer styles, which we find under Layer, Layer Style, and then you've got different things that you can control. Nice thing about these tools is that once they're applied, you will see them in the layer window, and you can actually go back and edit them if you wanted to. So we found a layer effect on this drop shadow that I thought was nice but subtle. It isn't very distracting. And again, we want to make sure we save our files. So I don't think we've saved this. We named it, but we haven't saved this file yet. So we've done some work here. Let's go ahead and save our Photoshop file. Again, it should have a naming convention. The one I'm using as my client acronym at the beginning with a description in between, a date, and the person who authored it. This is a convention that I use. Maybe you have your own. If you don't have one, get one because it certainly will make your file management a lot easier later. For now, I'm just going to save this to my desktop, make sure that the format is still Photoshop, that layers is selected, and then I should be good to go. So we hit save and hit OK. Alright, so now I've got all my work saved so far. The next thing we're going to do is introduce you to the type tool. I'm going to click on my background layer so that I'm working just above that and underneath my photo for now. And I'm going to choose this letter T, and once I do that, you'll see that I get properties up here that look a lot like Microsoft Word. So you get to choose a font. Let's go ahead and I'll just choose, let's do something that probably everybody has. I think probably everybody has Trebuchet, if that's how you pronounce it. I don't know, Trebuchet. So I'm choosing Trebuchet, I'm keeping bold, and you might have different point sizes here. I'm going to go ahead and choose a big one and just go with 36 for now. Make it left aligned, and I can change the color. I'm going to go with white. So I grab everything that's white. Actually, I could do something kind of cool. Let me do something like a baby blue here. This might work. We'll see how this works. Maybe not. The other thing I could do is I could use my color picker and grab a color that I already have in my document, and that would be a nice way to get repetition. So this is more of like a very light purple. So let's do that, and then I'm just going to click somewhere on my document. I get a flashing cursor that lets me know I'm ready to type, and I'll just put my name, Swanee. There we go. Now there are different types of fonts out there. This one happens to be something we call sans serif. Serif means, I think it's Latin, means feet, and sans means without feet. So you'll notice that this font in particular is a sans serif. It doesn't have any feet. Another type of font that you could consider would be a more traditional font, whereas sans fonts tend to be a little bit more modern, less formal, and contemporary. We could also go with something like Georgia or Times New Roman, where the font has feet, the tiny little feet. So this is meant to be a little bit more formal, traditional, and it's actually in print a little easier to read if you have large bodies of text, pages and pages and pages. Serif fonts are easier to read overall than sans serif fonts. Another type of font that we have is, we call it a monospace font, and a very popular one that almost everyone has is Courier, and it kind of looks like a typewriter made the font. And then we have some fonts that we could call a slab font. And what that looks like, I happen to have one called Alpha Slab 1, or here's Arbutus Slab. I'm going to go back to Alpha Slab 1. And in this case, we get a semi combination of serif and sans serif. If you can see that or not, like look at the S here. The S doesn't have feet. The E doesn't have feet, although in these they don't either. But here the S does have feet at the end. And then in some places you have part of the feet, but not necessarily everywhere. So at the bottom, it's sort of like a blend, if you will, of sans serif and serif fonts. And then of course another font type is going to be a script font. So a script font is going to look more like that, like cursive. Now the script fonts have a place, but sometimes these are definitely harder to read. So you would want to be a little bit careful when using script font. You wouldn't want to have large amounts of text in a script font, but maybe if I was just trying to simulate a signature, and it went over my photo, something like that, that could be alright. But as a main font, you may not want to use it because it's hard to read. Alright, so I'm going to delete some of these fonts. I'll keep my original one that I had with the trebuchet. The other things that I can control with the font are going to be several things. Actually, I can use the free transform with the text, and what's kind of nice is with Photoshop, I can stretch and squish all I want. Here I'm just sort of applying a little bit. I really don't have any rhyme or reason to what I'm doing. Just kind of making this up as I go a little bit. But the nice part about it is even though I've stretched it out, it's still editable. I can change the text. Another thing I can do is I can create bodies of text. So with the type tool, I draw a square where I want content to be contained. Now in this case, maybe I come back to a white text. I'll drop the size down to, let's go 16 points. I'll keep it trebuchet, but I'll go regular this time. And now I can start writing content in this area. I am an instructor at Pikes Peak Community College. Love what I do. Wouldn't trade it for anything. Except maybe tickets to see AC/DC. And I can even have a couple of returns. What do you think of Photoshop? Pretty cool stuff, eh? So what's nice about this is if I have the text selected, notice that I can actually change the shape and it will change how the text gets wrapped. I'm not necessarily squishing or squashing the text, I'm just changing the shape of what the text gets contained in. There are other things that I can change if I select all of the text. For instance, if I have my cursor in here, I can do Command A. With Command A, I get select all. So it'd be the same as doing select all. And then all my text is selected. Now I can come back and change the properties up at the top. There's also this box right here, toggle the character and paragraph panels. So if I open that up, I get the character panel here set up. So I could change the font. The next thing I have here is something called leading. You might refer to leading as line spacing. So I can change it. It gives you a default. I mean, if I make it too small, then all the letters will cramp up on top of each other. And if I make it too big, they'll be way too far apart. So there's also a way to slide this so you can get it to a point where you like it. In this case, with a 16-point font, 24 could be nice. It's nice to have a little bit of space between your text just for an easier read. Other things that you can change with your text is the height of your fonts. If you want them a little higher, shorter, you can go the other direction and sort of make them stubby. You can always bring it back to 100%. The other thing I can change is the spacing between characters. So if I bring this in, the letters start getting crowded and they run into each other eventually. And then likewise I can widen the font. And actually that was the width of the font. That's the character width. I'm sorry. So I can make the text smaller, narrower, the letters narrower. Thank you. Above it is the line spacing. So this is the space in between each character. We could call it tracking. So this increases the space in between the letters. Now for paragraphs of text where we read it, maybe it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to do that. That just gets harder to read. More often than not, we don't mess with tracking in regular body copy. Most of the time that will be done in maybe a heading or a subheading. So you could kind of see where that could be kind of cool. Maybe you're going for some kind of weird effect. It just depends what kind of play that you want to do with your with your text. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and save that. I'll keep my wompy, strange little thing here with Swanee, and maybe I even make it bigger. And this is now right aligned. I've got part of my text leaving the top. Got that little dot on the I getting cut off right there. And then I have my text a little bit lower. Another thing that we can do is work with paragraphs. So right now, by default, everything is what's called left align, ragged right. Other people have different names for it. But I can change the paragraph types. So that's also in my window. By default, it's probably going to be left align text. I could do right align text. That's not necessary. Sometimes this makes sense because if you've got some right alignment going here. Problem is this can start getting hard to read. As you can already see, you're trying to wonder, is this a new sentence? Is it not a new sentence? So I would recommend right alignment. Use that sparingly. There's also full justification where it aligns the left and the right side. Sometimes that can look nice, but then you get these strange, weird gaps that Photoshop has to put in there to make it work, and also you're going to start getting hyphenated text. I could always turn off hyphenation by clicking this little button here, and that sometimes makes it better, sometimes makes it worse. So it just really depends what you're trying to do here. I'll keep the left alignment because I think that's easier to write. The other thing I've done here is I've got inverted text on a dark background. if I'm going to do that, you have to always make sure you have high contrast. If this was a different blue, you can see that this is now too hard to read. Alright, so if we're going to do inverted text, you have to choose a color that has at least 40% contrast, ideally 60. So if I have a medium to dark blue, going with white text is probably the best bet. But this is going to be for a limited amount of text. I wouldn't do this with large with many paragraphs of text. Here I just have 2, so that's a quick read. But after a while, if you had pages and pages and pages or a lot of text on your page, inverted text gets hard to read. And you're not really doing anybody any favors by doing that. So right now with this design, I've got a lot of alignments going. I've left some empty space. Some people like that. It just makes a nice, easy design. Some people like to add just a little bit of dimension to their page. So if you want to introduce some angles and verticals, instead of everything being straight across, up and down, everything just absolutely lined up, bringing something in that brings it off a little bit can be a nice touch. Alright, so what we've done here is we've done a fair amount of work with editing the image. We added a little frame, we dropped it in here, we added text with Photoshop, and we've even got a pretty simple background. What you're going to be doing for your project is using stories, pictures to tell a story. You'll have 3 to 6 pictures aligned, and either you could do something where it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, because we read in a Z pattern. Notice my title is up at the top. That's usually a common place to put it. And then we can have text where we want it, but it is usually accompanying the image. So you could also do an S pattern. What could be difficult is having your story start at the bottom left and they have to do a different pattern. Not that it can't be done, but you're breaking a convention, so it's risky. Sometimes that can be fun if you succeed, but just keep in mind that maybe if we don't follow convention, like if we start with a picture here at the top and it goes down and then we have to go back to the top right, that could be confusing. That's not the normal reading pattern, at least not in the Western Hemisphere. Okay, so there you go. In this video, we've shown you how to get an image onto your computer. For us, we used the computer camera, but maybe you had a different camera, maybe on your phone, or maybe you actually have a camera. And then we have to have a way to get it to the computer. Once we have it in the computer, we open it up in Photoshop. We made some edits to do just some image correction. We converted it to black and white and added a tint. And then we brought it into Photoshop. We used the vector tool to create a frame. I then merged those layers so that this could become one image, one layer. We added a layer style for drop shadow, but we did it subtly so that it's not overbearing. We then came in and brought in text, and I could choose colors, I could choose fonts, I could choose sizes. There's a lot of choices when it comes to fonts. I chose a sans serif font because I wanted it to look modern and contemporary. If I wanted this to look a little bit more classical and traditional, I would have maybe gone with a serif font, the ones with the little feet. And then I just did a little bit of color picking. So I picked a little color in my photo here, put it into my title. Makes for a nice repetition. So you can see that we've got rule of thirds going as well. My content, instead of being right in the middle, is to one side. That's a little bit more interesting than right down the middle. I have some right alignment going here and a little bit of alignment going here. And then I introduced, just to add a little bit of contrast, instead of having the photo straight up and down, added just a slight cant to the photo. I've got repetition of color, and overall it's just kind of a nice, pleasant little design. Certainly much more interesting than if this was just a white document with black text on it. Alright, so this is why we design. We try to add interest, we try to make things clearer and easier and enjoyable for someone to view and read. And there you go. That's design.